The war had dragged on so long that the stars themselves seemed wearied by it. Captain Elias Cade stood on the bridge of the Valiant, his eyes fixed on the endless void beyond the viewport, where streaks of weapons fire flared and died in silence. Humanity had been clawing for survival against the Vaith Dominion for decades, and Cade had spent nearly every year of that war fighting on the frontier, losing more men than he cared to count. His features were sharp, sun-worn by years of stress rather than light, and his gray eyes carried the weight of too many battlefields. The war had taken his brothers, his comrades, even his own capacity for hope, but it had not taken his will to fight. That much he held on to like the last ember in a dying fire. Behind him, Lieutenant Orion Hale scanned the tactical display, his hands moving swiftly over the console. Where Cade was iron carved by years of attrition, Orion was fire barely contained. Young, sharp-jawed, with a mind built for strategy, he embodied the possibility of a future Cade wasn't sure would ever come. He spoke quickly, his voice taut but steady. 2 Vaith cruisers breaking formation. They're trying to flank our right wing. Cade did not need to look. He trusted Orion's instincts the way a dying man trusts the last drops of water. Signal Commander Marius to intercept. If they cut our wing, the entire line buckles. We hold here or Earth's defenses crack. The words carried the finality of command, yet Cade knew the truth. Earth's orbital bastion was already at risk. Humanity's fleets were dwindling shadows of what they had once been. Shipyards lay in ruin, colonies reduced to cinders, and every skirmish cost more than it gained. The orbital ring surrounding Earth was their last fortress, and even that strained under alien pressure. Sergeant Darius Cole entered the bridge with his heavy steps, his presence filling the space like a storm cloud. A soldier through and through, scarred from ground campaigns in ruined cities and poisoned trenches, Cole carried himself with the fury of a man who had never once forgotten who the enemy was. He dropped a gauntlet hand on the railing, his gravel voice carrying open disdain. We're holding here? For what? To die tired? The Vaith bleed us slow, and we let them. Orion shot him a sharp look but said nothing.
Cade turned.
We hold because the alternative is surrender. You'd rather hand Earth to them? Cole's lip curled into something between a sneer and a grimace. I'd rather burn them all before they burn us. His scars caught the sterile light, a reminder of the cost of that hatred. For Cole, the war was no longer strategy or politics, it was survival, personal and raw. Cade let the words hang, then shifted his gaze back to the viewport. He did not disagree, not entirely. At the rear of the bridge, quiet as ever, stood Dr. Marcus Valen, hands folded behind his back, his uniform crisp despite the chaos. Where soldiers carried visible wounds, Valen carried secrets. A scientist bound to military service, he had the air of a man who thought in dimensions others could not see. He seldom spoke unless necessary, and when he did, it was often with uncomfortable clarity. Now his voice cut into the air. The Dominion presses harder each cycle. They are testing the ring. They know we cannot afford to lose it. If they break through, Earth falls. It's that simple. Orion's console chimed with a warning pulse. Incoming jump signatures, Sector 9. His voice faltered just slightly. More than expected. The main display filled with crimson markers, Vaith reinforcements blinking into existence like new stars. The Dominion always had more. More ships, more firepower, more patience. Humanity could win battles, but never the war of numbers. Cade gripped the edge of the console. All ships, Titan formation. Prepare to bleed them again. He knew it was a delaying order, not a winning one. The battle unfolded in brutal silence, human destroyers intercepting sleek alien cruisers, railgun fire sparking against scaled hulls, missile salvos carving paths through black. The Valiant shuddered as kinetic rounds grazed its armor, and men shouted across the bridge, voices steady despite the storm. Cole muttered curses under his breath, Orion's hands blurred across controls, and Cade barked orders with the cold focus of a man who had surrendered the luxury of fear years ago. It was then that something shifted. A flicker at the edge of sensors, faint, distorted, an anomaly. Orion frowned, recalibrating the scan. Captain, we're picking up something. Not Vaith. Not ours either. Large mass. Very large. But the readings don't make sense. It's as if, he hesitated, searching for words. As if it's there, and not there. Cade's gaze narrowed. Cloaked. Valen stepped closer, eyes on the display. No known cloaking device behaves like this. It's not simply hidden. The space around it bends. His usually calm tone carried a trace of unease. On the viewport, the anomaly rippled faintly against the stars. No shape, no outline, just an unsettling distortion. Cole leaned forward, his fists tightening. If it's Dominion tech, we're already dead. Orion shook his head. It's not Vaith. Their signatures are organic mechanical, spliced. This is silent. Sterile. The bridge fell quiet save for the hum of machinery. For a heartbeat, even the war outside seemed to pause, as if sensing something had changed. Then the distortion peeled back, like a curtain drawing from the void. What emerged silenced every man present. The ship was vast, dwarfing even the largest carriers in the human fleet. Its hull was an obsidian black that seemed to swallow light itself, angular and jagged like a weapon sculpted from night. No symbols, no markings, no signals. It was as though it had been birthed by the void, a predator clothed in nothingness. Stars seemed dimmer around it, their glow consumed by its skin. Orion whispered, almost to himself, "What in God's name?" The Vaith fleet reacted first. Their tight formation fractured, ships pulling back in sudden, uncharacteristic disorder. For the first time in all Cade's years of fighting them, he saw hesitation in their ranks. The predators were afraid. Cade felt the tension coil inside him. If the Vaith feared it, that meant one of two things. It was something older than them, or something far worse. He could not yet decide which. Cole broke the silence with his growl. Doesn't matter what it is. Nothing that big comes in peace. Dr. Valen's eyes did not leave the ship. He spoke softly, but the weight of his words pressed on every ear. I've read fragments. Reports buried in archives no one was meant to open. There are whispers of vessels like this, left behind by civilizations long extinguished. If it is what I think it is, his voice faded. Cade snapped his head toward him. Say it plain, Doctor. Valen hesitated, then met Cade's eyes. It does not come to join a war. It comes to decide one. The words settled like ash over the bridge. The unknown ship hung in the void, silent, unmoving, yet radiating menace. The Vaith scattered at its presence, retreating into jump corridors without firing another shot. Humanity's fleet remained still, transfixed between terror and awe. On the bridge of the Valiant, Cade forced his breath steady. For the first time in years, he felt something foreign gnaw at him, colder than fear, heavier than despair. The war for humanity had shifted in an instant, and the enemy was no longer clear. The comms officer broke the silence, voice cracking. Captain, it's moving. The massive vessel stirred, its geometry impossible to track with the eye, angles folding and unfolding as it glided forward. It ignored the human fleet entirely, its trajectory fixed, deliberate. Cade watched as the symbols on the tactical display drew a chilling truth. The unknown ship was not moving toward the battlefield. It was moving toward Earth. The ship advanced with a grace that felt deliberate, as though the void itself had parted to allow it passage. No human or alien design could account for its dimensions, and yet its mass displaced nothing, leaving the sensors on the Valiant choking on contradictions. It was there, it was not there, and still it glided toward the heart of human civilization with an authority that demanded submission. The bridge crew could only stare as if the universe had revealed some long-hidden predator, and they were the prey too stunned to flee. Lieutenant Orion Hale broke the silence first, his tone tight with both awe and dread. It's ignoring us. Whatever it is, it doesn't see our fleet as a threat. His fingers flew across the controls, running diagnostic after diagnostic, trying to anchor the impossible in the language of numbers. The displays protested, producing only fractured readings. Captain Elias Cade's jaw clenched. He was no stranger to hopeless odds, but hopelessness was born of familiar battles, wars of attrition, enemies with names, fleets that could be measured. This was different. The unknown was a weapon in itself, and he knew it. "Patch me through to the fleet," he ordered. His voice carried none of the dread he felt. Command left no room for such luxuries. "Channel open, sir," came the reply. Cade spoke with clipped precision. "All ships hold position. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. We don't provoke what we don't understand." The order tasted bitter, and Sergeant Darius Cole made no effort to hide his disdain. "We just sit and watch? That thing's heading straight for Earth. You want to wait until it tears the ring apart before we fire." His scarred face twisted with barely contained rage, his fists tight on the railing. "If the Vaith built it, they'll laugh while we hesitate." Dr. Marcus Valen turned his calm gaze on Cole, his voice controlled but edged with something darker. "The Vaith did not build this. They ran from it, Sergeant. That should tell you more than any of my words." He shifted his eyes toward the looming vessel, their reflection caught in its void-black silhouette. Predators recognize greater predators. Cole spat on the deck plating, unrepentant. "Then we kill it before it kills us." Orion shook his head sharply, stepping between them. "You saw what it did to our scanners. You saw the Vaith run. Charging at it like fools will get us obliterated." His tone was fierce, but his youth carried an undertone of desperation. "Think, Sergeant. It hasn't fired yet. Maybe there's a chance to talk to it, understand it." Cole let out a bitter laugh, the sound more like a growl. "Talk to it? That's your answer? We've been slaughtered for decades, and you want a diplomatic summit with a nightmare at our doorstep?" "Enough," Cade snapped, his voice cutting like steel. He turned back to the viewport, his thoughts astorm. Cole's fury was not without reason. Orion's hope was not without merit. Both men reflected truths Cade could not reconcile. What mattered now was buying humanity time, even if that meant staring down the abyss. The abyss, however, did not wait. Without warning, the ship emitted a pulse, silent, invisible to the naked eye, but devastating to every instrument on the bridge. Consoles sparked, alarms wailed, and several crew members cried out as their headsets screamed static. Orion swore under his breath as his panel flickered violently. "Systems interference. It's scrambling us. Navigation, comms, even life support on the lower decks." The great vessel remained unmoving, yet its presence alone was enough to cripple them. Cade steadied himself against the railing, his voice iron. "Stabilize what you can. Prioritize life support and communications." "Already on it," Orion replied, though sweat traced the edge of his brow. Cole's eyes narrowed, his voice low and accusing. "Still want to talk to it, Lieutenant? It just killed half our systems without firing a shot." Valen leaned over the central console, scanning the corrupted data. Unlike the others, he seemed less shaken, more absorbed. "No, that didn't kill them. It tested them. Selective disruption. Notice, our reactors are untouched. Weapons offline, comms scrambled, but the ship itself, it spared us." He lifted his gaze, his expression unreadable. "That is intentional." The words dropped into the bridge like ice water. Cade stared at him, his tone sharp. "Spared us? You call this sparing us?" "I call it restraint," Valen answered quietly. "If it wanted us destroyed, Captain, we would not be speaking." Before Cade could respond, Orion gasped as a new signal bled through the static. It wasn't sound at first, but rhythm, a slow, deliberate pulse in the comms channels. Then, gradually, it resolved into something unmistakable, a voice. Not words in any known tongue, but syllables guttural and layered, resonating through the ship's structure as if the very hull carried the message. The crew froze, listening. The voice was alien, yet its cadence was deliberate, purposeful. Valen closed his eyes, straining as though parsing music for meaning. After a long moment, he whispered, "It is not speaking to us. It is announcing itself." Cole snorted. "Announcing our deaths, more like." The transmission ceased as abruptly as it began, leaving behind a silence that pressed heavier than the sound. On the main display, the massive ship began to move again, its trajectory unwavering, accelerating toward Earth's orbital defenses. "Captain," Orion said, his voice urgent but measured, "if it reaches the ring, we won't have time to decide anything. We need answers before then. We need to know what we're facing." "And how do you propose we do that?" Cole shot back. "Knock on its hull and ask to come aboard?" Orion's gaze held steady, undeterred by the sergeant's scorn. "If the Vaith fear it, maybe it's not theirs. If it's not theirs, maybe, just maybe, it can be turned to our side." Cade studied his young lieutenant, then shifted his attention to Cole and Valen. He saw in them the spectrum of humanity itself: rage, reason, hope, fear. They were all his responsibility, and the burden pressed heavier now than any battlefield he had commanded. Finally he spoke, voice grave. "Whether it's an ally, enemy, or something worse, Earth will face it first. We need to know more before it arrives. Valen, can you get me anything from its emissions, anything at all?" The scientist's lips pressed thin. "Fragments. Enough to suggest design far beyond either human or Vaith science. It manipulates dimensions we barely comprehend. I'll need more data, but the closer it gets, the more dangerous the attempt becomes." "Do it," Cade ordered. The Valiant shuddered again as another wave of interference rippled through, though weaker than before, as if the ship's focus was elsewhere now. Outside, the remnants of the Vaith fleet were vanishing into hyperspace corridors, abandoning the battlefield in disarray. Not one alien vessel dared linger. "They're running," Orion muttered, half in disbelief. "The Dominion never runs." Cade's voice hardened. "They do when something bigger hunts them." Cole's eyes blazed as he turned toward Cade. "So, we let it stroll to Earth's front door?" "Captain, with respect, if you won't fire, at least give the order to follow. We board it. We take the fight to whatever's inside before it decides our fate for us." Valen's eyes narrowed, thoughtful rather than shocked. "Boarding may be suicidal, but the sergeant is not wrong. Direct observation may be the only way to learn its intent. If we wait for it to reach Earth, we risk the annihilation of billions." Cade's silence stretched as he weighed the impossible. Fire now and risk provoking a weapon beyond comprehension? Board it and risk his best men in the jaws of something ancient and inscrutable? Or do nothing and let Earth stand as the first to feel its judgment? The massive ship loomed ever closer, its silhouette growing, its black hull swallowing starlight. Every second counted, and Cade knew hesitation could cost everything. He turned toward Orion, Cole, and Valen, the men whose strengths and flaws mirrored humanity itself. "Prepare a strike team. We're going to board it." The order landed with the weight of destiny. Orion's eyes widened with a mix of resolve and fear. Cole's mouth twisted into a grim smile, as though finally given a chance to lash back at the universe itself. Valen only inclined his head, his expression unreadable, though his eyes betrayed a spark of something else, knowledge he had not yet revealed. The bridge crew moved in swift silence, every man aware that history was bending in these moments. The Vaith Dominion had fled, Earth stood vulnerable, and into that void had stepped a new power, one that neither ally nor enemy yet dared claim. As the Valiant adjusted course to shadow the great vessel, the stars dimmed further under its consuming shadow. The sense of scale, of inevitability, pressed down upon them all. Cade stared into the abyss once more, his voice low, spoken only for himself. "We've fought for survival all our lives. Now we'll see if survival is enough." The black leviathan of the void moved ahead, silent and inexorable, its path set toward humanity's cradle. Behind it trailed the faint glimmer of human ships, fragile, defiant, and utterly uncertain of what awaited them in the dark. The strike team gathered in the hangar of the Valiant, the metallic thrum of engines and the hiss of pressurized lines echoing through the cavernous bay. Every man present knew the stakes, though no one spoke them aloud. The enemy outside had always been clear: scales and claws, machines grafted with alien sinew. But this ship, this leviathan of void and silence, was something else. It wasn't simply an adversary. It was judgment incarnate. Captain Elias Cade moved among the men, his expression carved from stone. He did not wear the heavy plating of a soldier, but his presence steadied them more than armor ever could. He was the one constant in this war of shifting losses, unflinching, relentless, the spine of every fleet he commanded. His eyes swept over the assembled figures until they found Lieutenant Orion Hale, fastening the seals of his black combat suit with hands steadier than his age should have allowed. "You're certain of this?" Cade asked, though his tone was not one of doubt, but of necessity. Orion met his gaze, green eyes sharp and unyielding. "If we don't go in, we'll never know what it wants. And by the time it reaches the ring, it'll be too late." Cade studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. He had learned to trust the lieutenant's instincts, even when they ran counter to his own grim pragmatism. Orion represented a fire Cade thought long extinguished, the conviction that humanity could outthink its doom. Sergeant Darius Cole was another matter. He loomed nearby, armored bulk bristling with weaponry, every scar on his face and every line of muscle proclaiming what words need not. His jaw tightened as he checked his rifle's charge pack. "We shouldn't be stepping inside this thing," he growled, his voice like gravel dragged across steel. "We should be putting every missile we've got into its hull until it's ash. Boarding it is suicide." "Then it's a suicide worth attempting," Cade replied evenly. "You've fought on burning ground before, Sergeant. You know better than anyone. Sometimes you go forward because there's no going back." Cole's lips curled, but the defiance in his eyes softened. He gave a stiff nod and locked his weapon to his chest. Dr. Marcus Valen stood apart, as always, silent in thought. He wore no combat plating, only a reinforced suit modified with scanning equipment and sensor nodes that glimmered faintly under the hangar lights. His role was not to fight, but to understand. Cade approached him last. "You've been quiet, Doctor." Valen's gaze never left the black shape that filled the viewport beyond the hangar's shield, the Harbinger, as his research had suggested. His voice came low, measured, yet with the gravity of one who had peered into something vast. "I've studied remnants of older civilizations, ruins, fragments, warnings written in languages long dead. I believe this ship is not a weapon of conquest, but of judgment. And if I am right, Captain, then we are walking into a trial." Cade regarded him for a moment. "Then we'd best prove ourselves." The boarding craft detached from the Valiant, a small dart of steel against the monstrous silhouette ahead. The Harbinger filled their view, every angle of its hull absorbing light, erasing the stars behind it. As they drew closer, details became visible, lines too precise to be natural, yet too alien to be human design. The surface seemed to shift subtly, as though it was not a hull at all but the outer skin of some vast, dormant creature. "Docking systems don't register anything," Orion reported, his voice hushed despite himself. "It's like it doesn't even recognize our craft exists." Cole muttered, "Good. Maybe that means it won't crush us like bugs before we knock on the door." Without warning, the ship reacted. A section of its hull rippled, folding away in silent, fluid motion, revealing an aperture yawning wide enough for their craft to enter. The team stiffened, weapons primed, but the aperture remained motionless, waiting. "It wants us inside," Valen whispered. "That's one way of saying it," Cole snapped. "More like a spider welcoming flies into its web." "Take us in," Cade ordered. The pilot obeyed, guiding the boarding craft into the abyssal opening. Darkness swallowed them, then light bloomed, an unnatural glow that pulsed along walls of obsidian alloy, forming patterns like veins through a body. The aperture sealed behind them, cutting them off from the starlight. For the first time in Cade's long career, he felt truly enclosed, as though swallowed by the void itself. The airlock cycled open with a hiss. Weapons raised, the strike team stepped onto alien flooring that pulsed faintly under their boots, alive with dim currents of energy. The corridor stretched endlessly, its geometry shifting subtly, as though the walls themselves breathed. Every man felt the same instinct clawing at him, turn back, flee, but none gave voice to it. Cole muttered, This place reeks of death. Not death, Valen corrected softly. History. They advanced cautiously, every step echoing. The deeper they went, the stronger the sense of presence became, not merely of a ship, but of an intelligence watching. Lights ignited ahead of them in response to their movement, leading them deeper into the labyrinth. Orion kept his rifle trained, but his eyes darted to the walls. This doesn't feel like architecture. It's more like we're walking through the inside of a mind. As if to answer him, the air shimmered. Figures appeared around them, translucent forms of men and aliens long dead, locked in the throes of terror. A human fleet torn apart, a Vaith city scorched to ruin, species unrecognizable screaming into the void, all flickered like ghostly memories. The team froze, weapons raised, but the phantoms did not attack. They simply played out their agonies, endless loops of extinction. Cole cursed, his voice tight. It's showing us graves. Whole civilizations, wiped out. Not graves, Valen murmured. Examples. Of what? Orion demanded. Valen's answer came with a weight that made the corridor feel colder. Of failure. The phantoms faded, leaving only silence and the oppressive thrum of the Harbinger's heart. The men pressed on, though every instinct screamed at them to turn back. Finally, they reached a chamber vast enough to hold an entire battleship within its bounds. At the center hovered a structure like a black obelisk, its surface flowing with shifting glyphs no eye could follow. As they stepped inside, the chamber came alive. Light poured from the obelisk, wrapping around them, pinning them in place like insects caught in amber. A voice resonated, not in their ears, but in their minds, deep and thunderous, layered in tones that defied language. Humanity. The word echoed inside each of them. Undeniable, raw. You are known. Cade gritted his teeth, forcing his voice steady. Who are you? The answer came vast and final. I am oblivion. I am judgment. I am the measure of survival. Visions flooded their minds. Endless wars across galaxies, civilizations tested, civilizations broken. The Harbinger had traveled for eons, awakening only when conflict reached its apex. It did not choose sides. It did not conquer. It judged. Orion gasped, clutching his head as the images pressed into his skull. It wants us to fight, to prove we deserve to exist. Cole roared back at the light, defiant even against the voice of eternity. We've been fighting for decades. What more proof do you want? The voice did not waver. Survival is not endurance. It is triumph. You will be weighed. You will be tested. Or you will be erased. The obelisk pulsed, and the chamber trembled. Outside, sensors aboard the Valiant screamed as the Harbinger's weapon systems came alive for the first time, energy building on a scale no human fleet could withstand. Inside the chamber, the voice concluded, each syllable carrying the weight of a verdict. The trial begins. The men staggered as the vision shattered, leaving them gasping in the silence of the chamber. The ship thrummed with power, its intent clear. Cade steadied himself, his voice like steel. Then we fight, and we show this thing why humanity doesn't die quietly. The Harbinger turned its gaze outward, its vast weapons aligning, not on the humans, but on the returning Vaith fleet, drawn back as though compelled by fate. The trial would not be a battle of choice. It would be a crucible, and humanity had just been thrown into the fire. The void blazed with sudden fury as the Harbinger's power surged outward. Its weapons awakened with a soundless tremor, rippling space itself, drawing the returning Vaith fleet into unwilling confrontation. Dozens of Crimson warships dropped from their jump corridors in chaotic formation, compelled by forces none of them understood. The Dominion had fled this thing, yet now they were dragged back like animals forced into a pit. And across the void, the battered human fleet braced in silence, trapped in the same trial. On the bridge of the Valiant, Captain Elias Cade stood tall, his eyes hard as steel though the weight pressing on him threatened to crush his chest. He had commanded through despair before, but never with the knowledge that even victory might not matter. This was no war between nations. This was survival placed under the scrutiny of something far older and far colder than either side. All ships reporting in. Orion Hale said quickly, his voice tight but level. The glow of tactical displays lit his young face, shadows under his eyes betraying fatigue. Readiness at 60%. Half our weapons offline from the interference, but engines and reactors are holding. They'll follow your orders, Captain. No hesitation. Cade's gaze flicked to him, and for a fleeting second, he saw the soldier Orion had become. The boy of fire had sharpened into something harder, something ready. Cade gave him the briefest nod. Then we'll give this ship the show it wants. Sergeant Darius Cole stood by the weapons console, his rifle maglocked at his side though his eyes burned like a man already in battle. The scorn was gone. Only grim purpose remained. We take the fight to the Vaith, like always. Let this monster watch. If we're being tested, we bleed them dry before we fall. Dr. Marcus Valen spoke from behind them, his tone calm despite the madness unfolding. This will not be a simple measure of victory. The Harbinger is watching how we fight. Brutality alone will not suffice. We must show unity, strategy, resilience. His gaze lingered on Cade. This is not a war, Captain. It is an argument for humanity's right to exist. Cade heard the words, but he knew the truth beneath them. Whatever the Harbinger sought, its judgment would not be swayed by speeches. It would be written in blood and fire. The Vaith opened the trial with a barrage of plasma lances, their red beams carving through the void toward human cruisers. The Harbinger did not interfere, it only watched. Human ships broke formation, railguns spitting iron slugs into alien armor, explosions ripping claws of light across the black canvas of space. Cade barked orders with crisp precision. Left wing, push forward and draw their fire. Right wing, swing wide, flank their rear. The Valiant stays center. Orion, keep me openings. Cole, when I give the word, unleash everything. The void became a crucible. Vaith cruisers rammed into human lines with savage ferocity, their biomechanical hulls tearing into steel plating. Human destroyers detonated in blossoms of fire, men burning silently in the vacuum. Yet through the carnage, Cade's fleet adapted, weaving formations, trading ground for precision strikes. Every maneuver was a statement. Humanity did not break. Orion's voice cut through the din, sharp and relentless. Target 3-7. Their rear shields are faltering now. Cole slammed the command, and a barrage of missiles tore free from the Valiant, their contrails flaring before they smashed into the alien cruiser. It ruptured in a silent inferno, scattering shards of crimson hull into the dark. Cole grinned grimly, his teeth bared like a wolf. That's one for Earth. But for each alien that fell, more pressed in. The human fleet strained under the onslaught, losses mounting. The ring itself hung in the distance, glimmering faintly above Earth's curve, waiting to be either shielded or destroyed. Cade steadied himself on the console, his voice low enough only for Orion and Valen to hear. We can't outlast them. Not like this. We need something more. Valen's eyes gleamed with quiet intensity. The Harbinger is not only watching, it is offering tools. Its systems are interfacing with ours subtly, but they're there. Energy surges, targeting corrections. It wants to see if we can use its gifts. Orion turned, startled. And if we take them? Then we prove adaptability, Valen replied simply. Cade's decision came swift. Do it. The Valiant systems surged as alien precision bled into human consoles, targeting locks snapping sharper, shields stabilizing where they should have failed. It was like fighting with a phantom hand guiding theirs. The fleet responded, striking with impossible accuracy, turning what should have been rout into balance. Yet Cole bristled, his voice edged with fury. We're puppets now. You see it, don't you? It's pulling the strings. No, Cade said firmly. His eyes never left the viewport, where fire and death painted the stars. It's showing us the board. The moves are still ours. The battle raged on, the Harbinger watching in silent judgment. Human ships fell, but never without taking enemies with them. Sacrifices carved openings, and through them Orion's strategies wove a net of steel and fire that slowly strangled the Vaith advance. Cole led ground fire crews with brutal efficiency, his commands cutting through chaos, every shot carrying the vengeance of a man who had lost too much to ever yield. But the cost was heavy. One by one, signals winked out, friends, comrades, ships that had fought for years. The Valiant shook under repeated strikes, hull plating crumpling, alarms screaming. Orion's knuckles were white against the console, his breath sharp. Cole staggered as a blast rocked the deck, blood streaking down his temple, but he refused to fall. Then came the moment of fracture. A Vaith dreadnought surged into the center of the battlefield, its weapons blazing, carving through human lines like a predator through prey. Dozens of human ships fell in its path. The fleet threatened to collapse. Cade's voice rose like iron thunder. "This is it. Orion, give me a way through." "Cole, ready the last of our missiles." Orion's hands moved with desperate speed, mapping vectors, calculating impossibilities. His voice came strained but resolute. "There's one shot. If we punch through their flank, we can drive everything we have into its core. But it'll leave us wide open." Cole wiped the blood from his eye, his grin feral. "Open's fine. I'll cover you. I'll make sure it burns." Cade looked at him, understanding heavy in his chest. Cole knew what he was offering. It wasn't a request. It was a promise. The fleet shifted, formations tightening, every surviving ship funneling fire toward the dreadnought. The void lit with explosions, human steel against alien sinew. And then Cole's squadron, what remained of it, broke off, charging headlong into the dreadnought's fire. "Go!" Cole roared over comms, his voice steady even as fire consumed his ships. "Make it count, Captain. Make it hurt." Cade's jaw locked, his eyes wet though no tears fell. For Earth. The Valiant surged forward, its missiles unleashing in a storm that ripped into the dreadnought's heart. Explosions cascaded through the alien beast, tearing it apart from within until it split in a cataclysm of silent light. The human fleet roared with muted triumph, their sacrifice searing itself into the stars. The Harbinger's presence shifted. Its weapons dimmed, its gaze withdrawn. The trial had ended. Silence fell across the battlefield. The Vaith survivors scattered, broken, fleeing into the dark. Humanity had stood, bloodied but unbroken. On the bridge, the survivors reeled in exhausted quiet. Orion slumped against the console, his face pale, his voice a whisper. "We did it." Valen exhaled, his expression unreadable. "No. We survived. That is not the same thing." Cade's eyes remained locked on the Harbinger as it loomed, silent and inscrutable. For a long moment, he wondered if it would strike, if judgment would fall regardless of their victory. Then, without sound, the black Leviathan folded in upon itself, its angles twisting into nothingness, vanishing into the void. The fleet was left in silence. Earth was safe for now. Humanity had passed this test. Cade straightened, his body aching, his soul heavier than ever. He looked at Orion, who stared back with exhausted fire. He looked at Valen, whose eyes carried truths not yet spoken. He thought of Cole, of the men who would never see another dawn. "We've been noticed,"